The next one is at Raigir, and this is called a koneru by the local people. That's another word which is in use for stepwells. This one, as you can see, is completely surrounded by fields. So this is an agricultural stepwell, not a religious stepwell. However, there is a story. The picture on the left shows you a small Venkateshwara Swami temple in the village. Looking at the picture, you can see that the architecture is very old, and the villagers tell us that this is 1,000 years old. Maybe a little bit of a hyperbole, but certainly it's over 600 to 700 years old, looking at the style of architecture and the construction technology. So Venkateshwara Swami is taken from this temple once a year, and he is taken to the Koneru, which you see in that photograph. However, Padmavati Garu lives in this small white structure that you see on the top of the hill. She doesn't live with him in this temple. So once a year, she is also brought down, and they perform their Kalyanam in this mandapam that you see in the picture on the left. So they are brought down here, the Kalyanam is performed, and they are taken back. Right across the stepwell from this mandapam is a gallery where the Zamindar and his family actually sit and they watch the proceedings through these 4 square openings that you see. Right above them, you can see the pulleys, and you can see the steps which are beginning to descend to the bottom. Some of the pulleys have a little bit of artistic work in them. Although by and large, as you can see, our stepwells in Telangana are a lot more very basic. They're very functional. They're not so beautifully embellished as they are in Gujarat, Rajasthan. So the picture on the right now shows you the pyramid as it is stepping down, and there is water at the bottom of this one. So these are the plans again. This is almost a perfect square, and it has a number of steps. Look at the cross section, and you can count about 42 steps to the bottom of it, and you see the pavilion, you see the mandapam here. The third one is at a place called Rajapanda. Rajapanda has a rocky ridge at the top that we've marked, a rocky outcrop, and I put this picture in just to show you the terrain. The terrain in our part of the country is full of rocks and granite. So we look at the architecture. This must have been a temple before, but due to subsequent conquests, it's now a platform like an Eidgah. But we actually go there and we interview people who live there. And this is the village Sarpanch, who tells us that despite all other differences, during Mahashivaratri, the Hindus, Muslims come out together and they go to the stepwell, and there is a ceremony that takes place there. So this is that stepwell in plan. And more construction details. It shows us how they are beginning to collapse. So again, we're beginning to understand the dynamics of structure. So I'm going to quickly run through more drawings, and then we do a comparison. We tell you the dynasty, the century, the shape, size, the depth, full tank capacity. And this is very important because for people who want to revive these stepwells, you need to know how much water you can store in them once you've cleaned them up. And some of them goes into lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of liters. So are these in temples, agricultural lands, or in mausoleums? The details are given there. Then we talk about construction materials, water sources, the condition, who is the maintaining authority? Is it the archaeology department, endowment department, or the villagers? So this is the research that we are doing. We are looking at the evolution of architectural style in Telangana. One of us is looking at comparison of stepwells in various regions across the country. Folklore and legends, although we don't know that this is fact or fantasy, once you hear a story, it's the job of someone who's documenting to put it down there on paper. We look at hydrology, climatology, geomorphology, and the role of women in a stepwell. The temple from the Agama Shastras, Vastu Shastras, religious iconography, building materials and construction techniques, wells in the irrigation system, and stepwell today. So you can see that there are 10 chapters that are going to constitute our book, each of them written by different people. So when we don't have photography, long before photography was invented, Looking at miniature paintings is one way of recreating the past. And here's an early example of a person who's actually immersed in a stepwell and conducting a ritual. Sketches like this tell us how the rainwater collects in depressions and how the water which is there affects the water table. And we begin to understand what is the level that we can expect in the stepwell. We look at groundwater levels in Telangana, the geology of Telangana, the geomorphology. So all this technical information comes through us through the internet or through visiting different departments. What actually tells us where there is underground water? There are specific trees and plants. There are herbs and grasses. There are hibernating animals like lizards, frogs, snakes, anthills. These are giveaways. The moment you see this, you know that there is underground water there. There are certain trees that are good indication that there is water there. Water, of course, has been talked about in the Rigvedas, in the Upanishads, also in different religions. Water is so important. So just quickly, I'll go through the first well I found in Warangal was this one. Full of debris, you can see floating plastic, really the detritus of human civilization thrown in here without any regard. But then word got around and the district collector said, let's clean up the stepwell. So from being what it was in the picture on the left, today it's been cleaned up by the government departments and there is water back in it again. So this is how the stepwell looks. The story goes that Rudrama Devi used to come from the fort, and this one is called not only the Antastula Bavi by the local people, but some people call it Sringara Bavi because they believe that she came here every evening and she bathed. But the odd thing is that there are bits of stone which don't follow any logical sequence, but are built into the wall. And we know that this stepwell was destroyed, but there was a man called Shittab Khan, who was really Sitapati, but then converted to Islam, who rebuilt this stepwell and using whatever he could find lying on the ground. In Devar Yamjal, which is just on the outskirts of Sikandrabad, this is a temple, a stepwell dedicated to nakshatras. And each of these small shrines that you see is dedicated to a nakshatra. Of course, stepwells were also thought to be fertile, for symbols of fertility. So there is a lot of iconography that is very symbolic of that. And we look at the architectural details. And we were lucky enough to see that there was a function taking place there that day where the Utsava Murtis were brought out from the temple behind. They were given a ritual cleansing in the water. Another stepwell in a place called Jankampet. This is actually in a bowl surrounded by hills. And the most interesting thing about this is that the hills have a lot of herbs and medicinal plants growing on them. And it's not just a story, it's a proven fact that when it rains and the water flows past these medicinal herbs and collects in the stepwell, the water here has medicinal properties and curative properties, even to this day. So you can see there's a blue net that prevents people from going and polluting it, but people, especially with skin ailments, come here to drink the water. At some point in its past, these white shrines were built because it converted from being a Hindu temple into being a Jain temple. So we assume that people meditated in each of these. And this is back to the very first stepwell. Put in this picture to show you the scale of it. These are the students who came with us, and you can understand how large the stepwell is just by looking at the size of the students who are measuring and making sketches here. On the left, you see the platform which is jutting out into the stepwell. That is called a Rangamanda, because there would be ceremonies that are performed there, and people would sit in the galleries that you see or on the steps. The white patches that you see at the bottom give us an indication of the average level of the water. It's white because there's fluoride content in the better part of Telangana, and fluoride actually coats everything with white, as you might have seen in buckets and bartans in your own house.